with the full crowd tonight, or this morning, tonight, encourage everyone to just speak into the microphone so they can hear us on the recording. So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's Economic Development Commission meeting for the City of Portsmouth for March 11th. I'd like to kick off this morning's meeting by welcoming our new alternate member, Ann Weidman. And thanks for joining us. I would love to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in serving on the EDC. I know many of us are familiar with you, and we're excited to have you. But
I didn't know I had to prepare a speech.
Oh, no speech.
I'm working at JSA Design. I've been there for 15 years. I'm their Director of Community Engagement, which is business development, but also staying involved in all things that happen in the community to kind of keep ourselves inserted in anything that's development related in the community. Alongside that, I'm a member of the Athenaeum, and I'm heading their Portsmouth 400 initiative, which will be some fun things. I'm on the board of Strawberry Bank, and I oversee the ice rink for them. And if I go back 2 years, I was one of the sort of founders of the Portsmouth Design Professionals Alliance that helped the city understand how best to bring outdoor dining to downtown Portsmouth. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Great.
And you live?
And I live about 8 houses away from Everett.
Great. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, great little neighborhood.
Welcome.
Friend of Everett.
Friend of Everett.
Great.
And they still let her on.
That was a knockout.
Great. So next we just have the minutes from our February meeting. Everyone has had a chance to review those. So, changes or updates, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Tom?
I do have a correction. At the bottom of the second page on the motion to write a letter to the council on the electric vehicle charging stations, it says deployment of level EV. It should say level 2 and 3.
Got it.
So we need to amend that motion to incorporate the change to the minutes. I guess with that, we'll make that clarification.
You said that amendment?
Yes.
Great. So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thanks, Tom, for that clarification. So today I'd like to welcome our guests. We've got Barbara Massar, and Russ Grazier joining us from the Blue Ribbon Committee on Arts and Nonprofits. So we're looking forward to hearing about.
You make space for both of you.
We'll slide over.
The musical chairs.
You're not Joanna Kelly.
Jacob, can you see the PowerPoint?
I'm not.
Great.
Yep.
Great. I'm driving the bus. Just can't make it go. There we go.
So we're not reporting on the McIntyre, but we're very happy.
We're not touching that.
Here. We're going to give the presentation that we gave to the City Council on December 20th, and there obviously in the 3 months that have passed since then been some developments that we'll discuss. We may insert them as we go along, or we may insert them after we do the presentation, but we want to share with you, and we were invited to share with you what we shared with the City Council back in December. So take it away, Barbara.
Give me 1 sec. We'll get the right presentation.
There we go.
Let me just get to Zoom. There we go.
But you can give the McIntyre one if you want.
We'll do that. That'll be the follow-up. The 2022 follow-up to our report will be the McIntyre.
Very good now. Let's try that again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the Arts and Nonprofits was assembled in January 2021 to identify and address the needs, concerns, and issues facing Portsmouth-based nonprofit arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations. As the community has navigated the ongoing pandemic, the committee's primary goals have been to work with the city to foster an environment that supports and nurtures our arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations and, where possible, identify resources that could aid in their success now and in the future. We'd like to express our appreciation and gratitude for the support offered by former Mayor Rick Beckstead, the members of the 2021 City Council, City Manager Karen Kennard, and city staff. We are very grateful for the staff support provided by Nancy Carmer and Stephanie Secord, both of whom have contributed significantly to our work as a committee. Meeting several times a month for the past year, we have continually experienced the unwavering support of the city. From the allocation of $51,600 in funds earmarked for arts and culture use that have been dedicated to an arts and culture marketing pilot program, to funding the Americans for the Arts, AFTA, Economic Impact Study, we have been able to make important progress toward our goals as a result of your support. And, effective January 2022, our newly elected mayor made the decision to have us continue our work for the next 2 years, designating City Councilor Kate Cook as a liaison to the council. Thank you, Mayor McEachern. The Americans for the Arts Survey. We've worked with Nancy Carmer to prepare for the next Americans for the Arts Economic Impact Study, which will now begin in May of this year. As a sidebar, I tell you that because this is the third time it's been delayed. We have the benefit of continuity from the 2015 AFTA study, with Robin Albert serving on the Blue Ribbon Committee. She was instrumental in the 2015 study as a member of the ArtSpeak Board of Directors. The marketing pilot, a concerted effort to jumpstart a recovery with a marketing push scheduled for spring 2022 in partnership with the Greater Portsmouth Chamber Collaborative, has been central to our work. The Chamber has contracted Darcy Creative to launch this marketing pilot, which will be a major push to bring audiences back to Portsmouth's arts and cultural venues. This pilot is just that, a starting point for a larger effort to help ensure the survival and recovery of our arts and cultural institutions. Additional funding outlined in the report will be needed to save our arts and cultural organizations. We cannot imagine Portsmouth without historic theaters such as the Music Hall, without contemporary art space such as 3S, without the community-building cultural events presented by Pro Portsmouth, without the education and preservation work of the Portsmouth Historical Society, Strawberry Bank, and the New Hampshire Black Heritage Trail, without the accessible performing arts presented by the Prescott Park Arts Festival, without the theater of New Hampshire Theater Project and Seacoast Rep, without the community connections built by the Seacoast Jazz Society and WSCA Community Radio, without the art of the Button Factory and the New Hampshire Art Association, without the interactive arts education programs at PMAC, and without so much more. The list goes on. What's next? We believe the use of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funds are appropriate for the recommendations set forth in this report because of the negative economic impact declining audience numbers have had not on just our arts organizations, but on the local economy as a whole. Our arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and therefore, The proposed actions we'll outline here meet the criteria for ARPA funding.
You can move to slide 2 now. In early 2021, the Blue Ribbon Committee surveyed Portsmouth's nonprofit arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations, our creative economy workers, including artists, and our local audiences and program participants. We followed up with an additional survey to the arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations in November. The feedback we received was consistent. Our arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations are struggling with a slow return of audience members and program participants. And while federal aid, including the PPP loans, shuttered venue operator grants, and nonprofit emergency relief fund grants provided temporary relief, it was one-time funding, and the recovery process has just begun. We learned that the housing concerns that have long been an issue for creative economy workers and artists were exacerbated by the pandemic, and the loss of income due to canceled performances and reduced sales revenues was the #1 challenge for these workers. We also learned that audiences continue to put a high priority on safety protocols for any activity that involves gathering people. And thankfully, now as COVID transmission rates or positivity rates have dropped below 4%, that's becoming less and less of a concern. It was still a serious concern in December. And now as we go through the winter, the slow return of audiences, which is still a slow return to this day, to these organizations is one of the most pressing challenges. Based on the feedback received in these surveys and extensive work sessions by the Blue Ribbon Committee, the committee would like to make the following 6 recommendations to the city at this time.
Our first recommendation is for direct support for the Americans for the Arts upcoming Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 study. Requests for funding to implement the study in 2022 and present the results of the study to the community in 2023 have already been approved. The AFTA study has been conducted in Portsmouth at least 3 times over the past 2 decades, and the data provided has been critical for local nonprofit arts and cultural organizations as they pursue their development and programmatic goals.
The next slide, marketing. The most important thing the city can do to help arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations as they continue their long road to recovery is to continue funding the Blue Ribbon Committee and now the Portsmouth Committee on Arts and Nonprofits marketing efforts. As Barbara mentioned, we're just beginning a pilot program with the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth that markets our community as an arts and culture destination and encourages audiences to return in 2022. The Blue Ribbon Committee's second recommendation is for a multi-year commitment to funding that would extend the current marketing pilot program. You're going to see a lot about this pilot program in the coming months. Based on what had happened with the Omicron variant and the timing of everything, we decided to do a real big push going into summer. So you're going to start to see this marketing pilot program come out in the next 60 days. The city needs to support pathways to audience engagement for arts and cultural organizations to bolster earned revenues. This will not only aid arts organizations in recovering from the economic impact of the pandemic, but will contribute greatly to the local economy as a whole.
Our third recommendation is support for collaborative community projects to be led by Portsmouth arts and culture nonprofits to further fuel the local economy in 2022 and beyond. Such projects would provide extensive benefits for residents and bolster not only the local creative economy, but contribute to economic growth throughout Portsmouth.
Our fourth recommendation is that the city implement an annual grant program to recognize and reward independent artists whose work adds to the value of the creative economy. Even prior to the pandemic, increasing costs of living have made it difficult for many artists to reside and work in the area. The pandemic has exacerbated these challenges while eviscerating many of the revenue streams that artists rely on. Artists are particularly hard hit because federal financial relief has primarily targeted nonprofit organizations. Portsmouth's arts and artists have historically been central to its identity as a cultural destination and a consistent source of value to the broader economy. implementing a direct aid program for artists, which symbolize the city's recognition of this value and commitment to supporting its cultural creators. Grant funding may include artist in residence programs in local schools and in public spaces such as City Hall, as well as public art projects, funding for public art, and funding for performing arts that are accessible to residents for little or no cost, including concerts, theater, dance, and more.
Identifying ways to address affordable housing concerns for creative economy workers is our fifth recommendation. Workforce housing is a community-wide issue that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Creative economy workers are no exception to this problem, and this topic comes up with regularity when looking at those who staff our creative organizations. We believe that work on affordable housing issues will not only have significant implications for our arts and cultural organizations and the people they employ, but on the stability of Portsmouth's workforce in all industries.
The sixth recommendation we made back in December was to continue the work of the Blue Ribbon Committee for an additional 24 months, allowing us to work with city staff to develop budgets and oversee the above projects, and to create a new cultural plan for the city of Portsmouth. It was the Blue Ribbon Committee's hope that the cultural plan would determine the need for and structure of any future permanent arts commission for the city of Portsmouth. And, as everyone here is probably aware, and as Barbara had mentioned earlier, Mayor McEachran did do that in the very first meeting of the year, and there is now the Portsmouth Arts and Culture Committee that's working towards these goals.
The time to act is now. The Blue Ribbon Committee, now the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofit Committee, has taken the charge given to us by former Mayor Beckstead and the City Council seriously, and we offer these strategies as solutions to the many challenges that we face. We must work together to help our artists, aid our institutions, and find a path to increased engagement with our audiences.
In December, we respectfully asked that the council pass these recommendations forward to the incoming City Council of 2022, which did take place. And it continues to be our hope that the current council will consider an allocation of 4% of the city's American Rescue Plan Act funds to support these recommendations. The unique nature of the ARPA funds awarded to the city can make all of this possible.
There is significant risk in not taking action in 2022. The message from our local arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations is clear. The road to recovery from this pandemic will be long and challenging. Like other communities, we risk a significant amount of loss, including the loss of cultural institutions that are central to the fabric of our identity as a community.
We continue to be appreciative of the opportunity we'd been given by the prior mayor and city council, and are appreciative of continuing this effort thanks to the work of the current city council and mayor, because we need to find proactive solutions to this ongoing crisis. Our work has only begun, and we hope to continue this effort not only in 2022 but beyond. Thank you for your support throughout 2021. We'd like to end by clearly stating that the outgoing mayor from last year and previous council set the stage for important work that can be done in the coming years. We'd like to thank all the volunteer members of the Blue Ribbon Committee for their service and their continuing service as they've continued on to this new committee, as well as the incredible support received from city staff. It's been an honor to undertake this important work, and we look forward to continuing it in 2022. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Barbara and Russ. That was great.
We're happy to answer any questions you have, and there is some new news that you'll hear later in the meeting about the efforts to create a new cultural plan for the city.
Great.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for our guests here? Tom?
This is probably my ignorance, but
Tom, we're going to ask you to use the mic, sorry.
thank you. I guess I'm not clear of what the original Arts Speak committee was all about. I understood that was going to be a standing committee of the city dealing with arts and cultural issues. And I notice that it's still listed on the city's website as an active committee with, or no, it doesn't say active, but it is listed as a committee containing members. So can you maybe explain the background on that?
Yeah, I was a past member of the board of directors for ArtSpeak and the president of the board of directors about 10 years ago, and was involved early on in the process. ArtSpeak was formed following the 2002 cultural plan as a quasi-government, I think they used to use the word quasi-government committee. Nancy might be able to clarify if I'm off on that. That's
exactly,
right.
That's exactly what it was. It also had its own 501.
It had its own 501c3. It was a really unique structure, and I think that the city and ArtSpeak learned a lot about the benefits, but also about the challenges of that type of structure over the lifetime of the organization. ArtSpeak dissolved, I believe, in 2019. I might be off by a year.
Might have been 20.
Might have been 2020, but the organization dissolved. Like a lot of nonprofits, it went through many transitions in leadership. When I was a member of the ArtSpeak board, the purpose of the organization was consistent to the cultural plan in that it was an advocate for arts and culture within the city and working to pursue the objectives of the 2002 cultural plan. We focused a lot on efforts to create artists' live workspace within the community. We did some public art projects, and we were very much an advocate for the Present for Art, which was eventually passed by the City Council. I think over time, the organization ran a course that it seemed prior to anything happening in the pandemic that dissolution of the organization was the best option, and the funds from that was held in the 501c3, not the city funds, but the 501c3 funds were then dispersed to the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for reallocation. So that organization no longer exists. When Mayor Rick Beckstead proposed this group, one of the things that he frequently said was that he would like to see this group reinvigorate what had happened with ArtSpeak and bring that back into the community. It's been consistently the view of the committee members that have been assembled for this group that such an action should be determined by a cultural plan and not by a small group of people within the community. So our efforts to re-engage the cultural planning process, create a new cultural plan for the city that can then be adopted into the city's master plan, and do it with broad-based support and input from throughout the community will determine whether or not there is a need and a purpose for a long-standing committee like ArtSpeak in the future. So I hope that answers. I don't know if you have anything to add, Barbara.
Not really, except to really reiterate the tremendous pushback from the group that formed last year that we didn't want to roll over and become this ArtSpeak 2, if you will. That if we've learned anything in the world, it's that we've got to be transparent and make sure everybody's involved. If somebody wants a voice, they have a voice. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us. You know, these items that we mentioned here are, you know, they just sound like bullet points, right? But the cultural plan alone is probably 1.5 years, close to 2-year project. And we're going to pull in some people from the community who've worked on it before, so they can give us their thoughts and their guidance on, you know, the positives and the pitfalls, you know, what to avoid. So there's a lot to do, but as far as ArtSpeak that no longer exists, we were tabbed by the city mayor and council to do this work, and we'll do so for the next 2 years.
I guess the one thing I would add, and I hope all of this answers your question, is that I've been involved in the arts nonprofit scene in Portsmouth for about 20 years now, and I've witnessed an unprecedented level of collaboration as a result of the pandemic. You might call it a silver lining or something like that, but the sector has really come together locally, regionally, statewide, and nationally, and even internationally to try and save our cultural institutions, because they really, a lot of institutions came very close to collapse as a result of what's happened over the past 2 years. And we think it's probably going to be a 5-year, if not generational recovery that we're looking at for arts organizations. And I think a lot of arts organizations are still in significant danger. So because we value the arts so highly in this community, and because it's such an integral part of our economy, we're very proud that the city has taken a proactive stance to ask what can the city do to make sure that Portsmouth's arts institutions and cultural institutions survive this. So, thank you.
I have a question.
I just wanted to say one more thing, and then I'll. I said this the other evening at the city council meeting in relation to what we've been talking about this morning is don't assume because people started to do things again that we're okay, because we're not.
Right.
So I can only use myself as an example, but, you know, Pro Portsmouth didn't do Market Square Day in 2020. We did a smaller version last year. We lost almost $200,000 over those 2 years. Nobody's written me a check. And some of the grants and programs to help us were wonderful, but they were just that, a little bit of help to just eke us by. But what we don't want people to think is, oh, we're okay, because, you know, the school is open and they're going to do Children's Day, so we must be okay, right? We're exhausted. We're going to amnesia on this already. And we just want to remind the community that we still really need your help. And we know the businesses know that too. And we know that we're teams because we hear from the local businesses, we're so glad you're coming back, because we feed one another, no pun intended, especially with our restaurants. But there's a real need there. And I think even, Russ, you started to say it a year ago, that you saw it being a 3, 4, possibly 5-year project. It wasn't going to be a bounce back. So, sorry.
So I'm on the board of the Seacoast Rep, so I very much appreciate that, and am very supportive of the work that you guys have done. Is there a specific request that you guys have for the EDC?
Well,
like, are you looking for a letter of support?
that would actually be fantastic. You know, we feel that the contributions of the local creative economy are so significant that a request of just 4% of ARPA funds to really buoy what's happening in the local arts and cultural scene would have a tremendous impact, and any support that the EDC can give towards making that happen would be powerful for us. Thank you.
And, you know, with my knowledge of the arts community and what we do bring to the city, we certainly bring more than 4% to this city.
Yes,
so
definitely.
I think that's a very fair ask.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I think it would be fair to suggest or assume that EDC contributions to the cultural plan, rewrite or update, if you will, would make a lot of sense. I see a lot of overlap there.
Yes.
If I could just add a quick, I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
No, you go.
I just wanted to add two quick comments. One is I think it's terrific that the notion of a cultural plan came back. I think one of the things, I was on ArtSpeak just after you, Russ, for the curve. We'll say the fade to black, and putting aside structural problems with the organization, there was also the parallel effort of thinking about the updated master plan, absorbing the cultural plan, basically taking cultural elements and rolling it into that. And I think having it standalone is a much more valuable thing, because it really, between that and after studies, it really puts out there just how valuable and important and embedded the arts are. So I'm fully supportive, would absolutely endorse a letter of support, and would love to see us contribute to the plan as it evolves.
I'll respond to that by saying that what I thought was one of the most powerful things about the 2002 Cultural Plan was the fact that not only was it an independent standalone document that the community then used, and if you go back and read it, a lot happened as a result of that document. The city did do an excellent job of taking highlighted aspects of it and adopting those specifically into key points of the master plan. So instead of making the cultural plan an appendix or saying we're going to do all of this, the master plan pulled out key highlights from all the work that was done in the cultural plan and what was appropriate, put it into the city master plan. So we both had it embedded within the master plan in a strategic way and also had the extra level of detail that a full cultural plan provides. So it was really a remarkable process that happened 20 years ago, and we're hoping to recreate that magic.
Great.
Excellent.
Before you have comments, so the last cultural plan was 2002.
2002.
It's been a full 20 years since then. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Nancy? You had a-
Yeah. And I think what I would say, just to follow up your last comment, was that the cultural plan, I think, raised the awareness. The American for the Arts Economic Prosperity Study quantified the value of the arts in Portsmouth, and that was very valuable to the policymakers, who in turn funded, continued the funding for Art Speak. And I think the one part of the history that you didn't include that I think is important to know is that about, Alan, maybe 10 years ago, probably maybe more like 8, the Attorney General's office said you can't be a quasi-government thing. You have to be one or the other. You have to be a 501c3 or a city entity. And at that point, Art Speak had some pretty good ideas that an independent art agency would want to do. The city was a little more conservative about some of those things. So when they had to choose between one or the other, they went off on the 501c3 tract. And theretofore, before that, we were doing all the finances for them within our finance department. So there was a stress put on the organization when that occurred. But you're right, Russ. The cultural plan, there was no PMAC. There was no 3S. There was no.
The loft wasn't here.
The loft wasn't here. We provided. Discover Portsmouth wasn't here. We turned our city-owned buildings over to cultural institutions. The Children's Museum, became the what's it called now?
PPM TV.
Yeah, the PPM TV.
Yep.
Pontine is now in the Plain School. All of that was a result, when you think of it, of the cultural plan.
And I
then
think there are
the need
for-profit
for venues.
businesses as well, like Jimmy's,
Totally,
that's in
yeah.
town now, that the cultural plan set the stage for an opportunity like that to take place in this community that likely wouldn't have been able to succeed 20 years ago.
Yeah, and the cultural plan was a plan by committee, which is hard, and why it took 18 months to do.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll be a little quicker this next time around. But the master plan, it set the stage for the master plan because people then understood, because of the cultural plan and the economic prosperity, the master plan is made by the people of the community. They are the ones that provide the input. And the theme over and over again at those input meetings was the value of arts and culture. So it's kind of a, fairy tale kind of thing when you think of it.
Sarah?
So thank you for coming and sharing with us. One quick question. Do the individual arts organizations have the support they need? I'm thinking about the SBDC resources around resiliency planning, financial planning, how to move from pandemic to post-pandemic. Is there an opportunity maybe to connect some of the folks that have come to speak at the EDC about some of those small business support services and specifically target those for arts organizations?
I can speak to that in that at Pro Portsmouth, we've been using those since the onset of the pandemic. And as a committee, though, we don't get to that level because we're kind of up here, but
I'm thinking of offering those resources to members of the arts community. Is that something that would be of value?
Yeah, it is of value. I think that the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts has done an excellent job of reaching out with a lot of those resources to arts organizations in the Seacoast as well as throughout the rest of the state. When I mentioned the level of collaboration that you're seeing, I mean, the Arts Council still gathers on a bi-weekly basis arts organizations from all over the state on Zoom to go over these things, have guest speakers come in. I worked for a while on the committee with FEMA on arts recovery in New Hampshire. So I think the larger arts organizations are very aware of these resources, and anything that you can pass along, we're more than happy to share with the group. I think where the big concern is with smaller organizations whose staffs have been so overstressed that sometimes even taking advantage of these types of opportunities can be a challenge. But yeah, any information you have going forward from the past, please send our way. We do a great job of circulating everything to the whole group. And one of the nice things about this group at this moment is that it's populated by executive directors from about a dozen local arts organizations and cultural organizations and leadership with a long history within Portsmouth. So we've been able to take a unique stab at some of these challenges because the group has a lot of decision-making power within the community, and that's been really powerful for us.
And just to follow up on that, there were different versions of groups that used to form. Portsmouth Arts and Historical Collaborative comes to mind about 20 years ago. But what you started to see there was, first it was the executive director, then he or she got busy, so he passed it along to whoever down the food chain, which, no disrespect to staffs, but those people can't make the kind of decisions we can. So what we've been able to do this last year, and the commitment we have going forward, are all of these key people together in a room or on Zoom, making the call together. So it's been really incredible.
Bob?
Just wondering how you came up with the 4% and what is 4% of the ARPA funds?
Well, the second question is easier to answer. 4% is $480,000. And the justification for the 4% was it's somewhat arbitrary, but not entirely. We wanted to be a respectful and realistic ask of the city. We looked at what it would take to do 3 years of the marketing program. And really find a way to get local and regional audiences back into seats or back into venues such as Strawberry Bank, and really create an opportunity for the city to allow the economy to rise and support the organizations. So that's a big part of it. Also, being able to respond and retain and not have an artist drain within the community through some supportive art grant programs that would impact local residents through schools and public spaces, and also try to work with other community organizations to see if we can address some of the workforce housing issues that are just an issue in the community overall, but are a significant issue for the employers that sit within our group and have creative economy workers. So we wanted it to be a reasonable and a respectful ask of the city, but we also wanted it to be an impactful amount, so that the amount of time being donated by the executive directors on this group could have some meaning within the community and for the sector. So that's the way we approached it, and tried not to over-ask.
And also, didn't we initially, we almost had a dollar amount to each of the 6 that we read to you, and we thought it made more sense and would be more powerful to just put it in one.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, thank you.
Could I just ask the city manager on that front if we're going to consider potentially a letter of support, which I think we would all be inclined to do given the magnitude of the arts and contribution it makes to the community. What's the time frame that the allocation of those funds is going to be made within?
That's a great question, and the current council will be taking that up forthwith, I think. And in the timing of preparing our FY23 budget, staff has done an honorable job of trying to respect what might be ARPA eligible to support our budget, but also to understand that there will be needs outside of the city. So internally, we are preparing a list of requests or items that we would think would be ARPA eligible. We would then look to probably have a series of work sessions or conversations with the council so that the council can stand up a formal process by which they would allocate funding. It's been public information that we have sought to use $5 million of the total $12.88 million for the acquisition of community campus. And we're also asking the school board for some of their ESSER funds, which is their version of ARPA, to help support the acquisition so as to not bond for more than we need to. So there's a lot of moving pieces in the conversation, and it's ultimately a policy decision of the council. So we want to be prepared to answer questions and yet defer to the way the current council wants to stand up that process.
And I think that the council will probably take into effect, like, what do we get for, the 4% versus like the 5 million, like as a community, like where do we want our decisions to lie? So I think that's really important, that we stick with something that's so key to our community.
I'll just add an update on your first recommendation, which but this group doesn't know. For the American for the Arts Economic Prosperity Study 6, we've already obligated and appropriated funds for the American for the Arts to crunch the survey data. So we've entered into a contract for that. We've also hired an administrator to assist with doing the surveys of our nonprofit organizations. That's all complete and ready to go when the survey starts. And we've also obligated and appropriated monies for when the survey is complete, for the executive of the American for the Arts to come up and do presentations on the data and meet with the papers and Rotary and the individual arts organizations. So we're on good footing there.
Thank you.
Could I just ask, what's the report out timeframe? Is it
Keeps getting moved back.
It's a moving target.
starting in May?
Late.
So fall of 2023, I believe,
Yeah.
is when the
Well
reporting
beyond
happens.
the consideration of
Yeah.
The goal is to do a 12-month snapshot of both the nonprofit revenues and expenditures and the way the money works with nonprofits in the community, as well as a 12-month survey of audiences so that we know how expenditures are being made by people who live here or who come into town, who they are. Do they live here? Do they come into town? How much do they spend outside of attending arts organization events, and get a good picture of that. So it's typically a 12-month process, and then typically about 6 months between when the process ends and when the unveiling happens.
Great.
Yeah, it should have been December.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it was moved to January, then it was moved to April, now it's May, so.
Well, I think, unfortunate that it got delayed, but I think it'll be more
Yes,
meaningful with the
yeah.
data
Yeah,
that comes
that's
out.
the hope.
So, great. When was the last time that was completed?
2015.
Okay. So that we could use as data if we wanted to.
It was planned for 2020, but got interrupted.
Right, right.
Many things.
So.
Great. Thank you.
Do we want to do a letter? Is the EDC, do we want to write a letter to the council? Do we want to put a number on it? I think.
I would like to make a motion that the EDC provides a letter of support for the recommendations outlined and support the 4% allocation of the ARPA funds.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin.
Second?
Second. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Great.
Mr. Chairman, Jacob has unmuted. I don't know if Jacob wants to say anything.
Jacob?
I just said aye. I was just
Okay. Okay.
Thought I heard an aye. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time and all the contributions that you, as co-chairs of the committee, have put into this since the start of the pandemic. And thanks for your endurance, and I hope the amnesia doesn't set in too firmly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so next we'll roll right into our subcommittee updates. The first we've got is our business retention and expansion. Alan, Bob, do you guys have an update for?
Yes, we do. We have been making some progress. We did meet with UNH Survey Center, and we got a proposal from them to survey businesses in the city. And what we're going to do is, I think, I don't know if we've decided yet, but I think we're going to survey as many businesses as we can, by email and get some electronic results. And then some of those results will also, or some of the questions we'll be asking are, would you like to meet in person? And so we're hoping that we will end up meeting in person with however many businesses respond, a decent number. And I think we had talked about, maybe that's a round table, or maybe it's one-on-one. I don't think we've quite gotten that far. But the other thing and Alan and I met yesterday about the actual survey, and I think we're going to try and pare it down a little more to, I don't think we've really timed it out, how long it would take someone to go through it. So we need to do that and make it a little more succinct. But other than that, we're making some progress, and I don't know if we have a date that we're talking about to get it out there. What do you think, Alan? Maybe a couple months?
Yeah, I would think if we get closer to the summer, I think it'd be a better time. The only thing that I would add is that, just for information of the rest of the commission, we've paired the survey was somewhere around closer to 100 questions than not. And for those of us, Mandy, I know you did that too, volunteering, sitting down with people, it was a very long, painful process. So moving it to electronic means we cut out redundancy first and foremost, and some extraneous questions, and we still just pared it down to 50 questions, which is a pretty heavy ask for someone online. There's all sorts of statistics about what happens when you get past 20 questions. I mean, just the abandonment, or people just go yeah, and suddenly it's just a sea of the same answer. So what we talked about most recently that we still need to sort of focus on is what we can do to narrow, not just slim it down, but perhaps narrow the focus of the survey. Let's think hard about what information we really care about gathering the most, and what is nice to have but not really relevant to some of the things that we want to take action on. So that work is probably the next step to take. So hopefully we'll have a report in the next meeting for that.
Any thought to chunking up the survey into targeted topic areas so that you get more focused responses in areas as opposed to taking too much out of it? I know that's also has its own benefits and drawbacks around survey fatigue and things like that.
Yeah, we hadn't. It's not a bad idea. I think one of the challenges would be, if nothing else, economic, because now we're talking about multiple surveys being handled by UNH as opposed to one. So, but it's not a bad idea. We ought to think about it and see what the impact would be.
Yeah.
Did UNH provide what's the cost for kind of leading into the survey, or is there one?
There is a cost depending on the size of the survey.
Okay.
And I don't have it in front of me. What was the cost for everyone? Maybe
everyone was
8,000.
around 8,000
Yeah.
or so.
And that included analysis of the survey, presentation of the survey. They do these postcards that they send out ahead of time. I'm not sure that we were all that keen on that component of it.
If I recall last time, I don't think we got the raw data back on the survey as well. Is that correct? That would be
That's correct.
That would be nice to get so we could perform our own analytics on it if we have the capacity to do so. I think we had the interpretation of the results, but not the actual results last time.
I think we're going to have more control this time.
Right. So I don't think we used the survey center last time, right? We used.
No, we used the extension, and part of that particular program is that there was a lot of confidential information that even we weren't supposed to. We would just take the cover sheet off and send it in. Right. So we have more flexibility this time.
Okay. Anything further for business retention expansion? Thanks. Good work there. The next, we've got our Sustainable Cities EV Charger Initiative. I know we've we've had our updates from Tom each month, and I know you've been making good progress, and we submitted a letter of support in the CIP. I believe that was adopted with funding for charging stations on the bridge lot. Is there any further update?
That sort of is the update.
Thank you very much.
To be a little more specific, you obviously saw the memo, which was in the packet of materials for today's meeting. That went to the City Council last week. And as you said, Phil, the City Council approved an amendment to the capital improvement plan for the next 4 years to add $150,000 a year toward the deployment of level 2 and level 3 charges. So we've kind of accomplished what we hope to do at this point. So I think the follow-up on that is to, I guess, help the city figure out where they'll be deployed and in what order, and then continue to follow what's going on with state and federal funding, which would potentially be a replacement or at least a supplement to what the city would be putting in this. There was a pretty good article in the Herald this week, I think it was on Wednesday, talking about the strategic roadblocks to electric vehicle charging in New Hampshire. If anybody hasn't seen that, it's worth checking it out. Yeah, okay, I'll pass that around. I can send it to you online if anybody wants it. But it pretty well summarizes the situation of electric vehicle charging in New Hampshire at this time. But it does reinforce what we've observed, which is that there is some more funding coming down the road. It will go through the state. The federal government will not be dispersing monies directly to cities or towns, but it will be going through the state. So I think it behooves the city to become shovel-ready, if you will, on these projects. The other interesting article in Wednesday's paper, I believe, was that a private individual in Rochester has obtained municipal approvals to install a private sector electric vehicle charging station with 6 charges, 4 level 3s and 2 level 2s. So it shows you that we will be seeing the private sector step into this market as well. So I think that presents an opportunity to interact in the future. So I think at this point,
Did you see the letter from the to the editor from someone from Rochester? It was talking about
I did not see that.
a car dealer that had installed a level 3 charger. I'm assuming it was the Volkswagen deal up here. But their demand charge for the level 3 was like $300. No, they only had one car. So when they charged the car, at least during the daytime, it cost $300 plus. So I think it's got to be managed, or you got to know when to charge and when not to charge. Or if you had a ton of cars, I guess it wouldn't be that big a deal because you'd pay the $300 and it would be sort of amortized over 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, well,
it's an interesting letter.
Yeah, I haven't read that. I'll go back and look for it. I do know that there are some issues. The PUC is trying to address some rate issues with Eversource on electrical charging, because the exact problem you have, which is that they're set up to have sort of a minimum charge. So if you don't have a lot of vehicles charging on a daily basis, then you're paying a high charge per, it's almost an access fee to get the electricity. Yeah. So that's under consideration at the PUC as far as I know. I don't think there's been a resolution to it. But again, that's part of the structural issues that I think we all going to have to address.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Okay. Next, we've got our Land Use Committee. Sarah is representing the EDC on that board as it starts to convene want to share?
Yep. I know this is a very interesting topic for everybody, and really glad to participate on behalf of the EDC and Councilor Moreau's Land Use Committee. So we had our first meeting on February 18th, and we were shared some information. I'll see if I can get this from Councilor Moreau to share with the rest of the EDC around income rates for individuals that qualify for affordable housing as well as workforce housing, and I was surprised to see how different they are for renters as opposed to homeowners. So according to the Portsmouth-Rochester Metro Fair Market area, renters making up to $53,000 and homeowners making up to $99,000 are considered in that workforce housing eligibility range from the state definition. So it's quite a high income level when you look at what the requirements are. And in Portsmouth, when we look at cost burdening, which means 30 to 50% of your income is tied up in housing, 7.3% of current Portsmouth homeowners are cost burdened, 10.4% of renters. And 4.9% of homeowners are severely cost burdened, so that's more than 50% of income to go to housing costs, and 7% of renters. So, and that's just the folks that are already in Portsmouth. That's not even covering the individuals that are not able to afford to live in Portsmouth for numerous reasons. So the Land Use Committee is broken up into two main areas. And the postulation here is that affordability for housing must be underwritten. So there needs to be some level of support in order to improve affordability in the city. There are two separate subcommittees of the committee. One is focused on municipal regulations, so there's a regulatory subcommittee. The areas of investigation for that are looking at land use incentives, flexible design, density bonuses, by right density, which means I think Councilor Moreau had spoken about this, where if you meet all of the requirements for an ADU, then you get the ADU by right as opposed to going in front of a board. So she is being a little provocative with some of the suggestions she has, I think, to try and move the needle on where we're at with affordable housing. Expediting reviews, how do we make, if something needs to go before a land review board, how do we make that as quick but as cover as much as necessary, looking at parking requirement reductions, and then ADUs, as I mentioned before. And so on the regulatory subcommittee, we have Councilor Moreau, Beverly Zent, Nick Cracknell, Rich Blaylock, and two members of the Planning Board. On the supported market side, what we're looking at is targeting incentives to help those lower income groups that I mentioned previously be able to afford more housing in Portsmouth. So fee waivers, public funding, or land contributions. Part of this is looking at, is there city land or areas that we could make available for more affordable housing. Alternative compliance funding, so fee in lieu of. What we're finding is a lot of developers will choose to have greater green space as opposed to contributing more affordable housing or workforce housing as part of their projects. How do we incentivize developers to be able to contribute more in the affordable housing place? And then low-income housing tax credits as well. So this subcommittee has Beth Moreau, Beverly Zent, Assistant Mayor Joanna Kelly, and myself. And a couple of things that I had brought to the meeting was it might be interesting to share the results of the business retention survey to the Land Use Committee, since we're going to be asking some questions around housing and worker location. And there's also an April housing study around regional housing needs that should be available sometime this spring that I want to make sure that we bring forward to the EDC. So our subcommittee has not yet met. Our first meeting will be on Monday, so I'll bring more information back on that. The only other thing that I would add is that we had a lot of participation from members of Portsmouth, residents of Portsmouth, that wanted to make sure that resident voices are both heard and participating on the Land Use Committee. And I believe that Councilor Moreau is going to go back to the mayor and see how either contributions or membership of those subcommittees could be augmented or include some of the residents as well who spoke out pretty clearly in support of and with some suggestions for how to improve. So I will leave it at that. I'll make sure that this information I get from Councilor Moreau is shared with the broader EDC, and welcome any input or suggestions from the EDC on the land use.
Great, thanks. Tom?
you can tell I've been reading the newspaper this week because I have another article to discuss. I think in yesterday's paper there was an interesting article about the owner of the Anchorage Hotel in York, who also owns another small motel, who's going to tear down the second hotel in order to build workforce housing for his people. And to me, that is something that we talked about 2 years ago, before the pandemic, and worth exploring. It would be to try to encourage doing that model in some type of a joint venture, because most small businesses aren't going to be large enough to build their own housing structure. But if you could get businesses that are suffering from shortage of workers because the workers can't find housing, then what's the possibility of putting together some type of private-public partnership that would be able to build structures knowing that they had tenants specifically tied into specific businesses? I think that's worth exploring.
Absolutely, and I think that was one of the questions that was going to be added to the business retention survey, was to say, do you provide housing? You know, if you don't, would you, to try and get some information back from the businesses. And in the film that was shown at the music hall around New Hampshire housing, we did see some examples of large employers that did build housing for their workers. So I think that's definitely an opportunity to look at, to see whether we have large employers in Portsmouth of interest as well.
Ben?
Yeah, I'd also just like to point out that if you're really interested in this topic, follow the work of John and Maggie Randolph, who own Harmony Homes in Durham, and they have built housing. They have built a daycare. They are building additional housing in Dover and have like additional developments in the works. So they are just a extended care, long-term care facility owners that are building housing for their employees. They're building daycares for their employees. So they're really exciting that it's happening literally 10 minutes down the road, just in Durham. So it can be done, and it's interesting to see the private sector step up on some of these issues.
Thanks, Ben. That's great. I guess I would underscore, I think part of that committee's work is probably going to highlight the challenges with employers of a certain size, which maybe aren't quite the huge employers that don't have the resources to develop, where it's so land is so costly, plus the development process can be contentious and is not straightforward. So I think for our arts community and maybe our restaurant community, service community, that could be a real challenge. So there may be some potential for kind of pooled funds, or I guess that would be an interesting exercise to take forward as you.
Absolutely, and as you look at the income levels for what qualifies for workforce housing, you can see many members of our service economy would apply for that, or would be eligible. So it's definitely a need.
Yeah, I think that's a great data point. That would be helpful as the council kind of considers any changes. The April housing study you had mentioned, is that going to be specific to Portsmouth, or is that the New Hampshire housing?
It's the New Hampshire housing one. I believe the results are due in April, but I can circle back on that.
Needs assessment?
Yes. Yep.
In addition, the Portsmouth Housing Authority is undertaking a needs assessment as well.
Okay.
And I don't know the timing on when that'll be released, but that will be very helpful.
And Craig Welch is on the supported market subcommittee as well. So
great.
As soon as he has it, I'm sure we'll distribute that.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so new or other business, Ben, we've got you leading off here with the Chamber Collaborative. Any updates to?
Yeah, just a few updates to run through. We are approaching a very busy time of year for us as an organization. We're just coming off of a great event, the Future of Calling Portsmouth Home. I think many of you were there. Thank you for attending that. It was a great night to showcase the need and challenges of affordable housing and workforce housing in New Hampshire and our community. The Arts and Culture campaign has already been discussed, so I'll skip over that. We've been kicking off our spring series of educational events. We have had one session already. We have another one, I think, next week on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice for business leaders. So we're excited to bring that education. We also have additional traditional educational opportunities on franchising models and trademark law. So some great educational seminars coming up. Next week on the 15th, we have Governor Sununu joining us by Zoom for the State of the State. We're really hoping he'll share more information about the $100 million fund for affordable housing support. So we're anxious to hear and see from him. So that'll be Zoom. That's a free event. You can register on our website to hear from that. It's in the morning. The following week, we have our Tourism Summit. That's our annual gathering of the tourism community. We're anxious to hear from Mayor McEachern and City Manager Kennard at that event, and we'll be just getting ready to kick off what is hopefully and looks to be a very busy summer for our tourism community. Our networking events continuing actually right now. Our morning mixer is going on, and we have our business after hours on the 31st of March, which will be at the venue at Port Walk, formerly known as the Harbor Place Event Center, for those of you that remember that. Important for this group, we have our annual Economic Outlook event scheduled for April 19th. That'll again be at Seacoast Rep Theater. It's a hybrid event, so you can come in person or you can join via Zoom from your office, if you will. We are fortunate to have Liz Gray, the director of the SBDC, joining us, along with the new presidents of the statewide Chamber of Commerce, Mike Skelton, the Business and Industry Association, joining us, and we'll have a panel discussion following their remarks with local business leaders about what they're seeing on the grounds here in Portsmouth. So that's the 19th in the morning of April. Hopefully you can join us for that. State of the City will be coming up in May. Stay tuned for that. Be in-person outdoor event at Grill 28. Again, hearing from our mayor and city manager about what's going on in Portsmouth. So we're looking forward to that. And just a couple other quick thoughts. I just want to share that the restaurant community seems to be very pleased with the results of the outdoor dining and where that discussion landed and the fee rates that were finally settled upon. Had a call with several of them yesterday, and they felt very comfortable. They felt like it was a fair amount. They were happy to contribute to the city, but it just had to found a number that worked for everyone. So thank you for your efforts on council there. We are just getting ready for a busy tourism season. We're getting our map and our guidebooks all finalized and out to print, which the printing world is wild right now. You have to buy paper in advance. I know, it's weird. So we are excited about the busy coming season and are really looking forward to warmer days and more people in town. But we've had a very busy from a tourism perspective, it's been busy so far. We've had downtown hotels have been largely sold out on Saturday nights in January and in February. And that's not something we have seen much in the past. So if that is an indicator of what is to come, I think we're in store for a very busy season this year. Great. So that's it for me. Any questions?
And, excuse me, you had mentioned the State of the State.
Yep.
When is that going to be held?
That will be the 15th. Okay. March 15th, 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning. It's Zoom only. When we scheduled this,
State of the State.
When we scheduled 4 weeks ago.
State of the State is the governor on March 15th.
Oh, okay. Well, then, or State of the City then at
State of the City is in May.
That's in May.
Yeah, it'll be in person. That's in May.
May.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So any other business?
I have a quick one, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. We are looking for, or the city's looking for, an EDC rep to a very light-duty committee, maybe just 2 or 3 meetings total, to help the Seacoast Greenway Bike Ped folks come up with the optimal signage and access points. We're at the point in the process where the city plays a role with the Planning Commission and DOT and all the folks that have been advancing the Greenway project. So the group is charged with giving input and feedback on how best to develop the signage and the access to the portions of the East Coast Greenway Trail that obviously go through here. So 1 or 2 EDC reps are being requested, so I'm just putting it out to the group. Everett says yes.
I'd be willing to do that.
Okay, great.
I did bike here this morning.
Yeah,
Saw your helmet.
So they are definitely that.
Great, thank you.
The challenge is on now, right?
Yeah.
For everybody.
Let's embrace.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yes, I just wanted to bring up a brief subject. The city is coming forward now currently with improvements to the High Hanover Street garage. Not only that we have the return of Eric Ebby, who is the traffic engineer, and so I was talking to the city manager about the need for updating the traffic and safety agenda, rules, things like that. And then thirdly is the Market Square upgrade coming up, and it's beginning. There's funding for that in '24, is that right? I believe so, in the CIP.
There's some money available now, and there will be some additional money sought. Yep.
Yeah. And so what this brought up to me was that I would like to think about what the city will look like. And when we had a visioning process with the council when we first started, we talked a lot about what downtown Portsmouth should look like in the future to make it the best city in the country. And I think a lot of that had to do with changing the ratio of sidewalk to street. And I think restaurants would be very supportive of that, and I think that if it's done right, businesses would as well. So I guess I think it's something for the EDC to start looking at and take under observation and think about, so that we can move forward with a plan. I think the Market Square upgrade is key to that. I don't have a plan, but I want to get it. I want to get it at least in front of the EDC to start thinking about.
Sure. Thank you for bringing that to us. Andy, do you have a
I
question?
sat just this week with Bob White for a couple of hours with paper and pencil, just playing with aerials of Market Square, of what might be, to kind of start to prep ideas of where it could go. And you know, when you get his ideas going on paper and I pepper him with questions, there's a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, I can tell that, but.
If I could, go ahead, Tom. If I could ask a question. There was a lot of talk and a lot of concern. First, I mean, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that that the city council voted the way they did on fees, and I think that's going to help the city. But I know that there was also a lot of controversy from at least a small group of vocal retail, as opposed, and maybe even the entire community, about the impact on their business. What was your sense, Ben and Vince, of whether they've been satisfied well enough?
I don't know that they have been. I think that the attraction of the restaurants is significant, and it brings people to the city who will also shop. I think that I only have my opinions, so I'm hesitant to say that, but I think that well, I'll tell you my opinion is that people buy things cars don't, other than parking. And I've seen cities where there's a very large pedestrian population compared to car population, and it has worked there. And I guess what I'd like to see is some research into how much parking is really necessary. Is it better to have parking in the outer parts of the city with some effective transportation into the center? I don't know. I can't say that I know, but I think that I've seen other areas where that has been successful. So.
Tom?
I have a comment, but before, let me jump on Vince's comment. There is actually a movement in a lot of cities around the world to reduce the footprint, if you will, excuse the pun, of motor vehicles on city streets, either by reducing on street parking or reducing traffic altogether. Not trying to repeat the, turn streets into pedestrian walkways that happened a lot in the 70s and 80s, but a more sophisticated thing. So there is some research, or at least there's some efforts out there in smart city areas pursuing that. So you can probably get some research on that. In fact, maybe our committee will look into that if you want and see if we can come up with something for you. I just wanted to comment on something a little lighter. Vince's comment about trying to make Portsmouth the best city in the country reminded me of a little-known fact that was, again, released earlier this week, although hasn't made the Herald yet.
Now we're ahead of the Herald.
I think I know what he's going to say.
For those of you who are Wordle fans, Portsmouth finished in the top 10 in the United States in the proficiency of solving the daily Wordle puzzle.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add two things that people may want to be reminded of as part of the discussion on outdoor dining and fees? There's a stipulation in the permitting process this year that will be adhered to, in that if you're going beyond the confines of your storefront with whatever you want to do in the public realm, you need approval from the abutter. That's going to change things. That's going to be a conversation that planning's already starting to feel out. There's about 12 or 13 restaurants that have already applied, so that could change the dynamic and the footprint outdoors. And 2012 was the last time the city did a parking master plan, and we're looking to do an update or a new master plan. So I think that conversation will help inform this conversation.
I have a comment kind of to the research that you were talking about, Vince. I've read a lot of research where when you slow down the speed of traffic, the businesses actually do better. And there's a lot of studies that were done where, I forget the name of the book, but I can send it out if anybody's interested. When you make it more walkable, that's when people are buying things. To your point, cars don't buy things. Like if I'm a retailer, my entire business is not coming from the one spot outside of my house. It's coming from the person who's walking to dinner next door. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I'm out at dinner outside, I'm much more likely to pop in because I'm on foot. I'm not driving directly to my destination. So, thank you for your work.
Yeah. I would add another thing that came out of the discussion of the using city streets or sidewalks is the composting. And that there is a caveat that if you compost, you can get a reduction in the fee for a restaurant. So,
great. Ben, you also had a comment?
I was just briefly to add that I do think we will see, with the fees as reasonable as they are, I still think you will see, a restaurant that might have had 3 parking spaces go with 2. Because spacing's not as big a deal this year as it was last year. It's because of research. So I think we'll see maybe a few less applicants. I think we'll see a smaller footprint. So hopefully the impact will be less.
So thank you, Councillor Lombardi, for bringing those topics to us. I would like to see a standing agenda item where council reps can bring those kinds of topics to us for awareness and discussion and to bring information back and forth. I think that's been tremendously helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add that I think those topics kind of dovetail perfectly with everything we've talked about for probably the last 10, 15, more years than I've been involved in EDC, between parking, managing kind of the inventory we have, smart cities, some of the shuttle things we had explored pre-pandemic, and I think it's a changing world, and I think it's smart that we kind of think about this ahead of time. I think if there's a parking master plan or study or policy revisions, that would be
that was my phone.
So thank you for bringing that to us. It would certainly keep us informed as those get underway. Are you on the parking, traffic, and safety?
No, I'm not.
No, so just
That's Councillor Bagley, but I sit on parking and traffic safety.
You
so I
sit on
can,
everything.
So I think there's a lot of synergy. I mean, to Tom's point about sustainable cities, I think it's kind of a future visioning for where we see us going. I think parking is certainly important for restaurants, retailers, all of the above, but as cars change, and, you know, I think if we can become more outdoor friendly, and with everything that's gone on with outdoor dining, and if that's going to stay in maybe perpetuity, or at least for the foreseeable future, that's an important piece of it as well. So,
And I think as part of that effort, Phil, we should look at reclaiming more sidewalk and taking stuff like, you know, there's many streets that are too wide, and there's a lot of data that shows, you know, you don't need to like put in speed limits, just shrink the size of the street, and like there's calming measures that, you know, they show it works. You know, if we can reclaim some of that and, you know, not have it be this in-between area of like, oh, is it a parking space? Like, you know, just put it back and make it sidewalk, make it an enclosed area, like, as we want it to be, and like redo the whole, you know, vision for that.
Yep.
I think that there's a lot that we can do to reimagine that.
yeah, I think that's a great point.
That's really what Bob and I were doing pencil sketches on, is we know we like to dine outdoors, but do we actually like to dine in parking spaces and on the street? And I think the answer to that is no. And so, you know, we were just playing with how do we rethink the street and sidewalk usage, and he's creative.
Great. Everett?
I think, to your point, Caitlin, there's the city is planning and getting feedback from abutters and residents on Fleet Street, where there's a bunch of redevelopment and discussion about should part of it be one way, because since some spots the sidewalks are small, and what could that look like, and does it go one way? Do we expand the sidewalk on one side, both sides, no parking, et cetera? So that conversation's alive and well, and you could go by, and there's a QR code, you could scan it and do the survey, send out information. I thought that was very helpful.
Sarah?
I was just going to add, I think when we look to change anything we have, either expanding sidewalks or changing to one way, we have to be clear about the incentives as a result of that, so it doesn't just feel like something is being taken away. So I think having an understanding of why this benefits a business overall, or how it benefits foot traffic, or how it benefits residents, has to be part of our conversation. Otherwise, it will be seen as a detriment as opposed to a benefit.
Sure. Good point. I would also, I think. Oh. Jacob? Sorry.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. I just kind of wanted to provide a kind of a point here, is I wanted to kind of point out the potential traffic implications, especially around like a place like Congress Street. And I was wondering if we collected any kind of traffic data after the 2020 and 2021 years when we kind of did shrink those streets. And I wondered if there was an increase of traffic in and around those areas related to the kind of the smaller street size, the less parking, all that stuff. Just kind of a comment I wanted to make about, you know, when you're taking a look at these decisions.
That's a great question. I'll ask the traffic folks. It may be it'll be a point of data for sure, but it'll be in a pandemic type year, so it'll be something we can follow.
Not to forget is that part of this fee structure for this year is there's going to be monitoring of how, and a report out at the end. So I think, you know, maybe adding some traffic analysis in there might be a good thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, those outdoor dining spots, it's definitely, they're great, but obviously when there's like rows and rows of cars sitting there, all those fumes, it kind of degrades the whole point of it. So I would like to see kind of the information around the increased traffic. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. I think just as examples of other streets where we've kind of done that effectively is maybe State Street. You know, as we've been doing infrastructure in the streets, widening sidewalks and just, you know, narrowing the actual travel lanes. It feels tighter in a car, but I think once you get used to it, it's certainly it works. So
Congress does not need to be 3 cars wide.
We've proven that.
Great. Yeah, Tom?
Of course, with parking.
Just following up on Caitlin's comment, I think the book you were referencing is Jeff Speck's book on walkable cities.
Yes, it is. Walkable, Jeff said, yep.
And I think PS 21 brought him to Portsmouth, and his recorded comments are probably on their website.
Great. So if we don't have anything further, I want to be sure to give public comment an opportunity here. our
I'll be quick, I promise, 'cause I know it's after 9. I assume you wanted me to sit at the table.
absolutely.
Just for those of you who don't know me, I'm David Choate with Colliers, and I'm thrilled that Andy's part of the commission now, so you'll probably be seeing less of me, or hearing less of me, maybe. I just had a suggestion and a comment on Tom's charging stations. Tom, I wondered if you had thought about contacting a guy in Rochester that's doing that project. I think with gas prices soaring, there's going to be more interest in electric vehicles and charging stations, and wouldn't it be great if we could find a private developer to actually do the project, not cost the city any money? And I think one of the things that Sean and I were talking about back there is, charging stations need to be in a location where somebody has something to do while they're waiting for the car to charge. My understanding, and I don't have an electric vehicle, but just what I read, it could take up to an hour to charge a vehicle. So wouldn't it be great to have 3 or 4 of those high powered charging stations in the garage? They park, they go to the shop, they go get a cup of coffee at a Cup of Joe or something like that, and then everybody benefits. So I didn't know if you were going to follow up and see. We might be at a point where it makes economic sense for the private sector to do this rather than the public sector. So
The answer is yes. I have a copy of the article. He's on my list of people to call, so.
Right, and I don't know if there are others doing it. That's the first time I've heard of this being, other than being part of a car dealership or something like that. So,
I believe the plan to redevelop the Burger King on Route 1 also includes charging stations for that.
Yeah, you're right. But I guess what I was trying to indicate is I think I heard a comment about the city's allocated money to spend on charging stations. Why do that if somebody in the private sector will do it? And so anyway, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Labate?
I just also read about the very popular place to put charging stations are in shopping center or grocery store parking lots.
Yeah.
People charge their vehicle, do their grocery shopping by the time they come out.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah, I just would kind of add on David's comment. I think that's been part of the discussions we've had on EVs along the way. So I think it's kind of a balance. The private market is addressing some of this, and there's an opportunity on all fronts for us to be using our downtown supply. So
It's very pleasant.
I know we're running past, but thank you everyone for joining. I think it was a great morning, great session. So appreciate your time. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do we need to confirm the meeting time? I'm looking at the...
Oh, right.
It's April 1st or 8th.
Yep. Yeah, I would vote for the first. We'll get back onto our.
Well, that sounds like a joke.
Any other thoughts? April 1st versus April 8th were a good week or so into March. I think I have no preference.
My preference would be the first. I moved to chamber program, so it wasn't conflicting. So we've been conflicting for a few months now.
I have a question.
Sure.
And, is 7:30 the best time for this committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wondered.
Painfully, yes.
Sometimes I have Thursday night meetings too, and it's like,
We can get you a cot somewhere in the room.
I'm
So you
leaving,
could just
and
stay
you're not going
here.
to make this any later after I'm.
Mr. Chairman, to that end, a couple of members asked what we might be doing to celebrate Nancy. And I'm completely in denial, so I didn't want to do it at this meeting, and I'm sure many of you share that sentiment. So I believe, and I'm putting Nancy on the spot, but she's agreed to come back to the April meeting to be thanked. Her last day with the city is March 31st.
I did, but probably not in my official capacity.
Correct.
I think Sean will be sitting in this
Correct.
space, and I'll be sitting there. But I just want to thank the EDC. I think I've had the privilege as staff to work for the best commission in the city. It's just been such a pleasure for me to work with the EDC over the years. I've met remarkable people. I've worked on remarkable projects. So I'm really excited about the energy of this commission. I don't have to retire, but it's time for me to retire and move on and have a change in this position. But I'm kind of sad because this commission is really going places, and I'm going to be watching. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Nancy, you can always sit back here with me.
And always come back for public
And
comment.
Nancy Jacobs giving you a high five hand on Facebook, on Zoom.
So your I moved for the April 1st meeting so that Nancy's first day of retirement is a 7:30 meeting.
Thank you for that. I'm thinking it's going to take a while. while for my sleep patterns to change anyway. So
It's actually probably kinder than the 8th, because by the 8th she'd be like,
Oh, I'm sleeping.
I go in my pajamas.
So, first it is.
Thank you, Nancy.
So entertain a
Move to adjourn.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Jacob.
you.